Hello, I'm John Perry, and I'm here for a year-end review with Representative John Damoose. Representative, your first year in the Michigan House has been busy. It's been very eventful. Just actually in the last few weeks, one of the keynote pieces of legislation that you have worked on in 2021 has been working its way through the process, and that's legislation involving the nursing shortage that we see in your district and really across the state of Michigan, and how maybe in a common sense way to alleviate it. So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about the problem and what your bill would do.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can tell you about the problem best by talking about an example in our district. We have in Petoskey, McLaren Northern Michigan Hospital, and they've just built an incredible new wing. It's a great hospital, serves people from throughout the whole region there. They have a desperate problem with a nursing shortage. And not only that, they have so many of their nurses with 2-year degrees who need to go back and get their 4-year bachelor's of science of nursing so that they can keep up with the technology and the various programs that are coming in there. So they asked me, they said, our solution is across the street at North Central Michigan College. Now, North Central Michigan College, as everybody knows, is one of the top community colleges in the state. They're one of the top nursing programs in the country. And they have everything it takes to offer a 4-year bachelor's of nursing degree. And we're sitting down here in Lansing saying these two can't work together. I mean, that's just wrong. And we have such a crisis with nursing, and it's only gotten worse over COVID, but it was coming anyways beforehand, that down in the Detroit area, the Henry Ford Health Service went to the Philippines to find 500 nurses to come fill these positions. Now, I'm sure they're great nurses, nothing against them, but the bottom line is we have to go literally to the other side of the planet to find enough nurses. We need to do what we can to fix that, and that's why I was doing these bills.
And I would think for your district too, a piece of the equation would be that if folks have to leave the district to go get a nursing education, there's no guarantee they're coming back.
It happens all the time. We see it no matter what. And we get tired of that as parents, watching our kids go away to school and never come back. I mean, sometimes it's a good thing, but the bottom line is we need this in our communities. This is why we have community colleges and why we pay for our own community colleges, is to address critical needs within our own community. It doesn't help us to send our kids off to Michigan or Michigan State or somewhere and they never come back, and our nursing program, we're still left with a terrible shortage in northern Michigan. So I think this is a no-brainer. And I really think they've been fighting this fight for 15 years. If we learned nothing over last year, or last couple of years with COVID, we've learned that we need to pull out all the stops to improve our healthcare system.
You're working on this plan with one of your colleagues from Grand Traverse County, Representative John Roth. Moving into 2022, what kind of path forward do you see for it?
Well, it's passed out of the Education Committee right away. It just passed right through. People love this. It'll go to the House floor, and we're going to have a fight on our hands. And it's not a partisan fight. You know what? I love universities. We should be proud of our universities in this state. They do great work. But the universities, I do believe in this case, are just worried about protecting their turf. They're the ones fighting this. And so they're talking, people with big universities in their districts are opposing this a lot of times. People who are more in districts like ours or have a realistic problem like this on the ground, we're supporting it. So I think we've got a fight on our hands next year, but this is something we're going to work tirelessly on because it's just pure common sense.
You know, Representative, your first year in the Michigan House of Representatives has been really an unprecedented time. You came to Lansing in a time of shutdowns and lockdowns and mandates. And along those lines, though, literally as soon as you got to the state capitol, you started to go to work for your neighbors and to fight for them, maybe arguably when they needed someone to fight for them the most.
Well, I'll tell you what, we don't have the luxury of time down here. This is a 2-year term. I'm hopeful to get a couple more terms, but who knows? I mean, I've been hired to do a job for 2 years, and I'm not going to waste a moment of that time. So when we started in January, You remember the restaurants were shut down, locked up, closed, and they'd been jerked around, to be honest. I mean, they had been told they could open. They went and staffed up. They bought all the supplies in December of 2020, and then they were told they had to shut down again, and they lost all that money. And so we were in a terrible state with that. So many businesses closed down. Regulations coming down from the governor that were unpredictable, that were ever changing. People just needed to get back to a normal life and to begin to rebuild their lives after the terrible year that was 2020. And so we started right away, jumped on, my first action, it seemed like a good idea to me, was to launch Restaurant Day, just to sort of lock in the day when
But they had been hit hard, of course.
They had been hit horribly hard. Restaurants were, I mean, it was amazing. Can you imagine not only being told to shut down for vast periods of time, but being told when you can reopen, you can do 25% of your normal business or 50% of your normal business. So we started with the restaurants, then went to MIOSHA. They have all these regulations that were just coming in, lockdowns and different fines and things. Had a bill out there to bring them some more accountability, which we need to do. That bill hasn't moved yet, but hopefully it will. Limit their restrictions to 30 days. We had one for Health and Human Services that everybody was begging for, because at the very least, the legislature needs to have a constant role in this. We're elected, and we're on a very tight rope with people that if we do a bad job every 2 years, we're going to get replaced here. So that's why we're here, is to oversee these type of regulations. And the Health and Human Services had been going off on their own, and we wanted to bring that accountability back. And so it's been sort of a year-long fight on how we can help rebuild the businesses and the things that were lost, how we can help families get back on their feet, and how we can just do common sense things in case before we face another emergency.
Because after all, the legislative branch is one of three co-equal branches of government. And of those three branches, you're the guy who actually goes out into his community every weekend, who makes the calls on the weeknights, who is in touch and listening to.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, there's so much you don't know coming into this job until you sit and listen to people. I mean, I take this idea of being a representative very seriously now. This is not an idea, oh, isn't that quaint that you're a representative of the people, but really you come down here and do your own agenda. That's not how it works. I campaigned on a number of issues that were close to me, but most of the things that we need to legislate on are totally different issues. Here's a big one. For the first 6 months of this job, I'd say 80% of the calls that we got were related to unemployment. People who had, and I'm not talking about the people milking the system or defrauding the system, I'm talking about hard-working people whose businesses either closed or had to lay them off because of terrible circumstances related to COVID, who weren't getting their benefits. And worse than that, we remember in July, or I guess it was late June, the UIA, Unemployment Agency, sent out letters to 700,000 Michigan residents saying, we made a mistake. You may not have actually been eligible for unemployment benefits. You may owe us back all the money. And this put people throughout our district in a desperate situation. I mean, getting letters. We had a family who got a letter saying, you owe us back $10,000. And you know what? It was dead wrong. They didn't owe a dime. And so I put forth a bill that still, we're working on it. It's come out of committee now, that if you're one of those who the state made a mistake and gave you the money, well, that's just too bad. You don't have to pay it back, because if I'm sitting here wondering if I qualify for unemployment, and remember all the rules were changing constantly, the way I'd figure out if I qualified is I would apply to the state of Michigan. And if the state of Michigan says, well, we've reviewed your application, and as a matter of fact, you do qualify, and to boot, here's a check, that's my answer. And so you can't come after me later. So we've been fighting the unemployment battle hard this year.
You know, Representative, one of the things that has struck me in the year that I have known you is that when you come down to Lansing, you're telling me about the previous weekend or the coming weekend where you're meeting with people literally, and you have a big district all over the geographical and philosophical map. You're meeting with the Right to Life folks. You're meeting with people with interests in the marijuana industry. You're meeting with truckers. You're going up to the Sulaks. You're telling people to come sit down for a cup of coffee and you'll solve their problems. Literally, you are all over your district. That's
the only way I know to do this job. I mean, I remember Well, I'll share that story another day. I love putting miles on my car, going from town to town, meeting with really great people. I always learn so much. There's so many fascinating things happening out there. I mean, this is partially doing my job well, but partially I just love the people I keep coming across. They're just great people. And you learn something new. Here's a big one. So we're at Sault Ste. Marie doing an office hour. And this woman named Sabrina pulled me aside, broke down crying, and she works with people who have substance abuse problems. And she had been on the phone the week prior with somebody as they overdosed and died. And this woman, a young woman, had to face that in her life. And, as a result, I don't want these things to just sort of end with a sad story like that. So we've made her a central part of our whole mission on mental health and behavioral health. And we've made mental health and behavioral health a serious priority, where we brought together more than 30 people who were involved in one way or another, whether it was law enforcement or counselors or hospitals together up in the UP, and they never all sat in the same room. And from that, we're working on a couple of facilities that we hope to have good news on soon in the Upper Peninsula and in the Northern Lower Peninsula. And we're going to take this on and not give up on this fight. And it's all because of that one faithful girl who came in and shared her story. And so the only way I know to find those stories and to sort of get my marching orders is by going around and just sitting and talking to people.
Bringing people together is important to you, isn't it?
I think it's the call of our day. We've seen way too much division out there, and I get it. There's strong viewpoints that people have, things we're really concerned about. I have serious concerns about the direction of our country. As I watch this country I've loved my whole life, really wrestle with moral issues and spending ourselves into oblivion, and there's terrible things. But at the end of the day, it matters how we treat each other. I mean, it's scriptural. It's built into me that we are to treat others as we would like to be treated. And I'll tell you what, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also practical. Because when you get people in the room and get them to start talking with one another, you can come up with productive solutions to things. I'll tell you, Bachelor of Nursing degree that we're working on with the community colleges. I was talking to several different universities, and they told me, John, this has been an issue that people have tried for 15 years. And I said, well, what have you guys talked with the community colleges about? Well, we've never been in the same room with them. I mean, that's preposterous in my mind. These groups out there are completely opposed to each other, and they'll never sit and talk and see if there's some way they can work out good solutions. So we're actually taking the lead in February on that. I'm really looking forward to that. Calling together representatives from community colleges, from universities, to sit in the same room with nurses and hospitals and roll up our sleeves and say, how can we make this better in Michigan? And that's the way I know, that's the only way I know how to get things done, is to get people in the same room talking.
Okay. John Damoose, there's going to be plenty to talk about in 2022, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your time.